Hi, I'm Herm Gailey. This week's episode deals with the flying lead change. We'll show both a more finished horse, demonstrating how to do a flying lead change, and then showing a horse much less advanced who's changed leads only a couple of times, beginning that process. If you watch both, you should have a better idea of where you want to go and how to get there. Stick with us, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Hello, I'm Herm Gailey. We're here to talk about everybody's favorite subject, the lead change. This is a fairly challenging maneuver. It can be done in a very simplistic way, but if you don't put in the right building blocks, even a horse that naturally will change leads will start to decompensate, to start to not change as well as he does naturally. You can come across and swap a horse from circle to circle a lot of times and say, wow, he can change leads. But he didn't learn to change leads. He just happened to offer that to you. Someday, he's not going to want to offer it, or he will learn that he's going to change directions when he changes leads, so he'll start to drop his shoulder, or he'll just get lazy. So better to teach them to change leads, even if they have the natural ability. The first thing you do want to find out, though, is does your horse have the natural ability, the agility, the athletic ability to change leads? And I look at these things out in the pasture, and if I see one galloping across and they look to the right and they change to the right lead, and they look to the left, they change to the left lead, I know I'm going to be okay. When I see one persistently galloping around, changing halfway, front leads, not hind lead, or if I just catch them always loping around on the wrong lead and back, you know, they're on the left lead in front, right lead on back, I start thinking, well, I may be able to put lipstick on this pig, but it's never going to be much of a date. So those are things that you work with. You have the horse you have, and some horses are going to be more proficient at this. I think you can teach most horses to turn around, to spin reasonably well, because it's a more mechanical maneuver. Now, a talented spinner is a great thing, but most of them can learn to do it. The stop and the lead change, there's a certain amount of God-given ability, and if they don't have that, you probably you're swimming upstream at best. Not saying you don't want to work on it, not saying you may not be able to achieve it, but a horse that has a lot of trouble changing leads may never be easy to change leads on in combat conditions in the show pen. So with that understanding, what do we want to do to get to where we can change leads on a horse? Well, first of all, you always go back to those three basics. If you can't send your horse forward when you squeeze, you're not going to have much luck with the lead change, because the lead change is a forward maneuver. The horse has to step over into that new lead with enough impulsion to carry their back end and front end over together. So you need to have your horse willing to go forward, not running off, but willing to go forward. If you change leads and they immediately slow down, very often they'll slow down before they have completely changed, or they'll be dropping down on their front end and they'll drag a hind lead. So you have to have a horse that will go forward. You have to have a horse that is pretty good in the bridle, that when you pick up on them, they're going to give. They're not going to pull, they're not going to lean on you. They're going to give. And you need, and this is most important in the lead change, you need to have control of your horse's body through your legs and your hands. So you need to be able to move a horse's hip. I'll move it your way. You need to be able to move a horse's hip and their nose the same direction. So this is very different from the kind of yield to hindquarters that you see on green horses. I'll tip her nose to the right. I'll yield her hip to the left. But see, her nose is to the right and her hip is going left. That's helpful to teach a horse to move their back end, but when you get into the lead change, they have to be able to tip to the inside with their nose and bring their hip to the same direction. Now she should soften up there. See how she's a little stiff? I'll just walk her forward there until she starts to let down. But you need their head and their hip go in the same direction to do a useful lead change. The other thing that you need to be able to do is you need to have your horse doing a good leg yield even at a lope. So if you're loping, which we're not, and I wanted to change leads to the right, I'm on the left lead, okay? This lead here to the inside. I'm gonna straighten my horse a little, move her over to the left. So I'm moving her shoulder out of the way and then move her hip over to match her nose. And right there is where your lead change occurs. Right when you go from that little bit of a yield, which is more pronounced in a green horse, to hip and nose the same direction, is where that lead change lives. So that's the anatomy of a lead change. As your horse gets more proficient, you're going to have to do less of that yield. So you're not going to go to the left. You're just going to barely put that left leg on, or right leg on, bring the left leg over, and it'll be imperceptible. The other thing that you want to do definitely is you want to stay away from persistently doing lead changes that rely on a change of direction. So I'm going to lope her around here and I'm going to show you the pattern that I'll use when I'm teaching a horse to change leads, and then I'll show you how I change that up. Also embedded in this whole process, your horse is going to have to know how to counter canter. So what I will typically do is I'll put my horse on, in this case, a right lead lope. I'll go way down to the end of the pen, and I'll make a diagonal to the corresponding corner the other way, and about here, shift my horse over to the right and not change leads, because you want to set them up a lot of times before you change leads. Now up here, going around the top of this circle, guess what I'm doing? I'm counter cantering. So it's built into this maneuver that you're going to counter canter. So I'll move her over to the right. Now when you're doing this, using these diagonals, if I was to have changed leads there, I'd have to double my horse back ridiculously sharply. What you want to do when you change leads is to do it when you're oriented so that your horse will naturally go off in a circle. In this case, to the left. And I'll show you as I come across this diagonal the other way why that wouldn't work too well. So suppose I make a left lead change here. I'm going to have to go the whole way back around like this. So there's a lot of directional change built into it, which is not what you want. So I'm going to come back across this line, and the next time as I come up toward you facing the camera, I'm going to yield her, put my leg back, and change a lead. And hopefully we'll have a good enough camera angle. I'm trying to figure that out as I go. So we're coming across here, shift her over to the right, make sure she's going forward. There you go. Now, you'll notice there's a little bit of a change of direction here. That's why I only use that diagonal either on green horses who are learning or on older horses occasionally, because even that little bit of a change of direction will get them to where they're hunting that change and they'll throw their shoulder in. If your horse throws his shoulder in, that means he is almost mechanically required to change front leads first. And even though he may change hind leads, he'll be late. And if you're in a horse show, that's a penalty situation. Now, this is something that I've said in other videos. To avoid going on endlessly, I'm just going to work on a right to left lead change for the most part. But of course, you'd kind of even these things up. But I will share with you something that I do that is a little bit contrary to popular wisdom, and that is, there's some days I'll come out and I'll do 3 or 4 or 5 right to left changes, not change it all to the other lead. You don't have to do it all in the same day. There's this concept that everything you do, you got to do on both sides right away. Sometimes if things are working, you say, well, that's enough for today. So that's the very basics. Now, if I go out here and start to lope around, what I'm going to do, and I mentioned about the counter canter, you want to have your horse to where they will either willingly pick up a counter canter, or you can bring them around and establish it by a gradual change of direction, kind of like I was doing coming across this diagonal. But I believe this mare is broke enough that I can just move her over and lope off to the right. So now I'm loping on what would, in a reining, be the wrong lead. But it's only the wrong lead if it's not the lead you asked for. And in fact, this is exactly what I was asking for. Now, this mare is doing something that she has a tendency to do, and I'm just going to ride through it. She likes to drop down in the front end. I'd rather she didn't, but I'm going to live with that for right now. So what I'll do in this position is I'll move her over. That's the preparation to change leads. I'll move her over again, because remember, I'm going to prepare my horse and not change leads maybe a dozen times sometimes before I ever change a lead. And then when I get down here and the camera angle is a little better, I'm going to step her over, put my right leg back, and change the lead. Now, as I get a little further advanced, I'll do something that's a little bit more difficult. I'll yield my horse into the circle and then go back out. Yield my horse into the circle just a little, go back out. And then I'll change leads to the outside lead. Now it's a little harder for it, it's a little more degree of difficulty. But see, what we didn't do was we changed leads and we didn't change directions. Now when you change back to the left lead, you're still going to the left. And that's a little bit of a change of direction. So what I'll do other times is, and this is kind of tricky, I'll change leads to the left and go off to the right and establish a counter canter circle the other way. So that instead of falling into the direction of the lead change, you're doing the opposite and your horse learns not to fall in. Ooh. So, very oversimplified, that's my process to changing leads. And what we're going to do in another segment is we're going to have a younger horse and a younger rider who are ready to change leads and sort of show how we help them to advance that. But that is the nuts and bolts of the lead change. There are a million places you can go wrong that I haven't addressed, but if you follow this and your horse is soft, if he's obedient, and you haven't accepted bad behavior along the way. If the horse is doing this willingly, you're probably going to get leads changed on one that's good leaded, and they'll probably have a built-on lead change that she can rely on. So those are my thoughts on the most daunting of maneuvers in some way, the flying lead change. And if it's helpful to you, you're welcome to it. Thanks. Now let's get Shannon out here with her mare, and we're going to sort of quickly check out the basics on the mare. And she's been riding her for a while, and the mare looks like she's going well. Get an idea whether she's going forward, responding to the bridle, and moving off her legs. So go ahead, bring her out here, Shannon. Now, it's not quite fair. We've had her sitting there for a while. So let's just see what she does if you ask her to move forward. If you put a little, there you go. That was nice. And this has been a little bit of a thing with this mare. She has a big stride and she can really go places, but sometimes she's a little sluggish getting into it. That was perfect. That's what you're after. Go ahead and do it one more time. I want to make sure that wasn't a fluke. I don't think it was. Yeah, there you go. And she was a little pokey and you picked her up. So the stage is set for her to go forward, because the lead change is a forward maneuver. So from there, we make sure that she's soft in the bridle. Go ahead and just sort of put her in the bridle and make sure she's not rooting out. And just walk her around like that. That's fine. Just make sure. See, and she's quiet and she's given to the bridle. She's staying forward. Shannon's not having to mess with her hands. She's not stiff. That's good. Now let's see how we are if we just move her, say, just straight sideways in a leg yield. Do we have her responsive off our leg? And that would be the one thing I've seen that so far I would fault just a little, is she could be more responsive. Go ahead and sort of spark her up a little. Take your leg away and bump, bump. I'm not so much thinking about going forward, but to get her moving off your leg and shifting sideways. Because if these parts aren't working, the odds of our finished product being successful are less. So just sort of break her down to a walk and move her straight sideways to the, whichever way you were going. I think you're going to the left. Just see if she will move off your leg. I just want it there, that's what I was looking to see if we had. And let's sort of get an idea how she is moving just her hip. Sort of isolate her hip and move that around her front end. And I would bump her just a little. There you go, there you go. Now, have you really had an opportunity to start putting her in that curl, or actually the dressage people call this maneuver, or probably a more classy version of it, the travers? So Shannon said she has not done that a whole lot. She has the other pieces here. The mare's moving her hip over, she's good in the bridle. So we're gonna cheat and we're gonna do a diagnostic test to see if this mare will step over and change leads. Then what I would do, instead of working on the lead change, I would work on getting her to where she's really getting good at tipping her nose, say, to the left, and her hip to the left at the same time, because that's your lead change right there. And sometimes I'll do this in that position and just move their back end around with their nose in. So why don't we take a shot, lope her around a little bit, make some of those diagonals, make sure she's forward, maybe do a couple of little leg yields at the lope into your lead to just make sure that she's moving off your leg when you're loping. So just go, you know that pattern that we tend to run.
Yeah, do you want me to do front cameras or just go ahead and ask for the lead?
No, I would go ahead and go around the whole pen a time or two.
Okay.
In other words, that big long, so you're gonna be counter-cantering one end.
Okay.
And normal lead the other end. Gotcha. But just so that you get her forward, because she's been standing for a while, and you can practice that leg yield a little bit in the course of doing that.
Okay.
Okay. So we're packing lots of things into one session. No guts, no glory, right? So this is a sequence that I do, a sort of a pattern I do quite a bit. You come around the end, then you go across the diagonal. That gives you the longest amount of straight distance that you're going to have in a pen like this. And then you actually get into a counter canter down here, and that's a good thing for them too, to see if they'll hold the lead for you. And what Shannon's doing that I absolutely agree with is she's moving this mare forward. The lead change is a forward maneuver. You can get it and should get it to where they'll do it from a very slow collected gait eventually, but not right now. So this time when you take her across, see if she'll leg yield just a little bit to the left.
Okay.
Shorten that right rein. Yep, there you go. That was actually, Shannon, better than I thought I was going to see. Good job. And do the same thing coming this way. Now this time, if you feel ready, when you get short of the center of the pen, and if you want to make it one more trip, and then we'll do it the next time, but start moving her over here in a leg yield. So you got lots of room. Now just keep her loping, don't change. Okay, just keep her loping, go around that end, and that's where we're going to do the lead change, folks, is to where she blends into a circle over there, as opposed to having that sharp turn that she'd have if we did it on this angle. So you can practice your leg yield on this one. And now the next time you come across, begin your leg yield as soon as you make the bend here, and then ask her to change. Don't get violent with it, just bump, bump, bump. There you go, now bump, bump, bump. Beautiful, beautiful. So all the parts work there. So now you're on the other lead. I will share with the viewers that this mare is in pretty good shape, so we can lope her for a while and not do her one bit of harm. Probably not even get her out of air. So now we're on the other lead. Let's just go ahead and lope her around a time or two. What we don't want to do is change leads too soon. What we do want to do is leg yield her from time to time to sort of bait her and make sure she doesn't take the bait and change leads when she's not asked to. So for every time you do change leads, you probably want to move them over and set them up like you're gonna, maybe half a dozen or a dozen times. A lot of times I will lope a horse around and not change a lead at all, but I'll do all of this other stuff. So come across here, move her into that right lead. There you go. Now just keep loping. There you go. Oh, there you go. Did you ask for that?
No.
Okay, that was a little unintended, but don't scold her.
Okay.
I would just break her down. Now that was a good lead change, but you don't want her volunteering. So don't scold her. Because she thought she was doing the right thing. She's just trying to help. And volunteering is good in the Army, maybe not so good when you're trying to make one really reliable as a lead changer. So move her into that right lead. Now go forward, but don't change a lead. There you go. There you go. What you did was right. You kept your leg on her to keep her from stepping into you. That's really good. Really, really good. Move her into the lead. Good, really good. Just keep her loping. Now this time, start your sequence way up there by moving her over and change leads as you come down this straight line. So I would already start moving her into that lead, change. Beautiful.
That one was intentional.
That one was intentional. Yep. So we asked for 2 lead changes. We got 3. We'll keep the change. So just go ahead, say whoa to her nice, and let her stop. And she came down. She's not excited. Now, that can be a little bit stimulating to them.
Yeah.
So walk her around, maybe bend her down and let her relax and let all of that, whatever tension she seems to feel, which is not bad.
Yeah.
This is now, she's on her own time. We're going to work on her off switch a little bit. What I think we see here is we've got a horse that really has a ton of talent to change leads. And the fact is, you and I and your dad have known her since she was about 6 months old. And when we'd work her in the round pen, she'd blink her eyes and change leads. So we knew that physically she had the ability. That doesn't always equate to the horse being willing to hand it to you on a silver platter. What's nice is you've got her prepared and she brought the platter. So good for both of you. Now, what we're not going to do, if we are smart, is we're not going to work a lot on lead changes for a while. This was diagnostic and useful, but we just stole those lead changes. You want to get a little better control of her hips, maybe get her a little safer in the bridle, and make sure that she doesn't want to offer you or insert a lead change here that you didn't ask for. Because too much is just as bad as not enough. But what we know now is she can and she's willing. And if you've got those two things, the sky's the limit.